Hi, and welcome to Spiritual Expansion. I am your host, Melissa Feick, and I am delighted to have Mary Rodwell here today. And Mary Rodwell is the foremost expert in ET, UFO, and interdimensional contact. She is a wealth of knowledge. And what I love most about Mary is that she tells it like it is, and she also shares everything. She holds nothing back. So welcome, Mary. Thank you so much for being here today.
Melissa, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
I am really excited because what I want to know about the most is what you've learned about the ETs and or interdimensional contacts and consciousness. What are they trying to tell us about our consciousness and the new earth?
Very important questions. And for those that are not fully aware, these interdimensional beings, some of them are physical, some of them are interdimensional, some are extra dimensional, some are transdimensional. And we believe that some are even coming from our future. So this is a real complex way of understanding these kinds of contacts. And the other thing that I'd like to say, depending on someone's belief system, depends on how they will interpret them. So what we've got for those that perhaps come from a conventional religious background, what they will see maybe as angelic. So, someone with a different perspective may see them as light beings. So interpretation will come from the individual in how they understand their spiritual life or their multidimensional experiences. So, that's really important to value, is how the person themselves understands their contact. The other thing that's really important is there has been throughout history a truth embargo on the truth of extraterrestrial contact. And that is really one of the major problems for individuals that have experiences, and why many of them are confused and frightened and struggle, because if you own to a conventional traditional psychologist or psychiatrist that you're having experiences with these types of beings, then they're most likely to see that as some kind of mental aberration or fault, and you'll be headed towards medication and hospitalization. In many cases, that has occurred. And so it also forces people to be quiet and not talk about this, despite the fact that they may be having visits throughout their life and are literally living two realities. So a lot of my work has been about normalizing this as a reality, because it is. And one of the most important things to understand is that how it was perceived in the past was they were gods that visited this planet. They were worshipped as gods because of the technology they had and their abilities. We have to go from that perspective to realize they weren't gods at all. They were just higher intelligences coming to this planet with greater technology and higher technology, and were perceived like that. So that's the first thing that's really important to state. I firmly believe that whatever country, all the gods that we have in various, in history, we hear about the different gods visiting. Indigenous peoples talked about the sky beings. Right across the planet, we have this, where indigenous tribes talked about coming from the gods or the star beings or their ancestors. So, to normalize this rather than make it difficult to understand, it's real because of the fact that they have been visiting, and I believe are part of our genetic makeup. And this is why they're interested in us, because we are their progeny. And I, as a former nurse midwife, it was very important for me to look at the understanding from a 3D perspective. And the 3D perspective, we know that we have anomalies in our DNA. we have dormant DNA. We also have, there are many molecular biologists that have said when they admit it, that we have been intelligently designed. And Dr. Francis Crick, the very renowned Nobel Prize winner and co-founder of the DNA molecule, mentioned that he believed we were intelligently designed. So when we say, why are they interested in us? Wouldn't you be interested in an indigenous species that you've been part of their creation and seeing how they evolve? And so the other point, to give you some of the stories that I'm receiving all the time, and I've worked with over 3,500 families and children. When you have an 8-year-old explaining to you that she goes on board this craft, she's shown how to levitate, she's shown how to use her abilities, and was also, she told me, shown how they use genetic engineering with different species to create a species for different seeding of other planets right across the universe. And she's shown this as an 8-year-old. And this is what many of these children that I talk about and I wrote about in The New Human, the important thing here is they're being shown their history, the origins of who we are. And this in itself, when people say, well, why are they interested in us? Well, why wouldn't you be seeing the progress of different species that you've helped as part of a seeding on planets? You want to know how they're evolving, what's happening, what's going on. And that is why they're interested in us. And there are many, many, many different intelligences that are interested in us. And that's why I have to say there's not, everyone talks about the little greys. And that seems to be it. And maybe, a mantis being or whatever. I'm saying no. Even with the Zetas, there's 165 species, I was told by one lady, of just the greys. So it's like taking one human being off this planet and saying everyone on planet Earth looks like this. This is how they are. And there are more humanoid species than there are others, like the greys, and there's the reptilian ones, the lizard-like ones, there's crystalline beings, there's geometric beings, there's energy beings, there's light beings, it goes on. It just goes on and it goes on. And that's because we have a cosmos that is teeming with life. And many of them are coming to visit or interact with human beings. And this is why so many people now are having interactions, because we're at this crucial point in our evolution at the moment, a really significant one. And we can see that with what's going on the planet right now. The main thing I'm seeing is an acceleration of higher consciousness, of awakening that is happening right across the planet right now. And the children that are coming in are even more activated and awake. And some of their abilities is quite incredible. But the most important thing is to acknowledge that we are going from being told that we are just this physical vehicle with 5 senses, and people suddenly being activated into their multidimensional selves. And it can be very confronting if you've been taught that you can only trust your 5 senses and your intuition, your sensing, feeling, knowing, seeing maybe orbs of light, seeing energy fields, and seeing energy itself can be very, very scary if you've always been taught that that's not real. So a lot of my work is helping people to manage that part of their awakening and consciousness.
Yeah, the consciousness is definitely changing. And I've been in this field for a long time. And the last couple years, the acceleration is phenomenal. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was, so I want to give you a quick background. So I actually I don't talk about this a lot, but I have memories of being a person or a being on other planetary systems. And I actually remember being part of a council. These are all spontaneous memories that have come flooding in, and and some human memories as well. But what I've recognized is the more that I embody those parts of myself, the more I become multidimensional. So when somebody is really not sure what they're experiencing, how do you help them?
It's a very good question. First of all, I'd like to say that as they get activated, many of them start to have recall of other lifetimes on other planets, other star systems, and even can recall agreeing to come in and embody in human as part of the wake-up call of humanity. They've come in, some of them identify themselves as hybrids and will say, you know, I've got more star visitor DNA than I have human, and they will identify with a star system like Arcturus or the Pleiades or even another star system that we don't know or whatever. And many find that that's very integral to why they've incarnated this time, because of that mandate. You know, they'll say, I know I have a mission, but I don't know what it is yet. Can you help me find out what my mission is? The children are quite stunning in their recollection of, even as they're a spirit choosing this life to come in. As one 10-year-old said that he remembers agreeing to this particular life and finding himself in mummy's tummy, is how he put it. Another 10-year-old explained that he came from a planet where he was a blue being, and this was his first incarnation, and he'd picked a mother who'd had many incarnations on Earth, so she could help him because he was a center seed here to help with the pollution on this planet. So they are already connected to their awareness. But the ones that are waking up, some of them, the teenagers, are also ahead of the game, because they seem to have this encoded wake-up call, and they'll suddenly realize in their teenage years that they're a hybrid or a star seed, and then everything changes for them in terms of what's going on. But for the adults that may be in their middle years or older, or the older models like me, if you like, it's something that they've been aware of intuitively and sensed, but have never allowed themselves to own. So a lot of my work is helping them to own it and integrate it. And by that, it's offering them tools to learn to have confidence and validate it. So I will help them connect and say, right, this is how it works. You used to know how to do this. Let me remind you of how this works. But you've got to finally accept that you're more than your physical container, that you have multidimensional awareness that has been feeding through, and you've maybe dismissed your intuition or that knowing or that feeling that you have. Let me show you how you can work with that and bring in your clairvoyance and your clairaudience and your clairsentience, so that you can start working with communication to the team, the non-human team.
What are you learning from especially these young children about what's going on with the new earth, the new consciousness, the new human? What are they saying about that?
Well, I'd like to just read a couple of statements from a young 12-year-old who I asked that very question of, because she was very connected to her team, and she calls her connection Rosella, and her name is Amy, and she's a 12-year-old. And this is what she said when I asked the question, so what's happening on the earth at the moment? Everyone is moving dimensions. The higher self of each person individually is working hard to bring into alignment the new dimensions upon earth. Every higher self on the planet is trying to do this, even if the person is totally unaware. Humans are emotional beings. There are beings of lower vibration on the planet, not necessarily from Earth. They feed on low negative vibrational energy. As the higher self of each person is moving or trying to move their energy higher, this will mean less for them to feed off. Therefore, certain beings are creating negative emotional situations on Earth to keep humans from changing dimensions. Well, we're seeing that already. The higher energy vibration, the less emotional we become, the more neutral in happiness and harmony with the planet and each other and our lives. So she said basically there's an energy battle going on with each person's higher self and the darker energy beings. She said there's no judgment involved in hierarchy. We're all equal, even the darker energies. We're just experiencing different lives. Everyone will evolve to the higher dimensions eventually. Nobody will be left behind. It's just varying in timings. These moving of dimensions is happening throughout the galaxy, on many other planets too. She said, there's a separate reality for those who've not reached this vibrational state, will still be around, but in another reality full of emotion and drama, a different reality. The shift will happen to all and lift us to a new, kinder, caring, less emotional reality, but the timings will vary. What's interesting, Amy says, about her job is helping people to connect with the earth, to ground people, help them connect with their higher selves. She's also been told she's got powers that she'll gain. She will use channeling, magic, and alchemy. She comes from a different galaxy, many galaxies away. She has also warned that there are famous and very popular people leading the spiritual world with many followers that are loving the attention and not always working for our best interests anymore. They lower our vibrations with their rhetoric and negative tales. And I will say this, although it's controversial. She said that the vaccines are not good. Not everyone who's had one, though, will be affected, though many will. And I add that because there's a lot of information coming out now with this other aspect that's happening on Earth at the moment. But there's an overview from a 12-year-old connected to her source that is saying exactly what we're feeling and experiencing on the planet right now, that there is a huge shift in going on, almost a polarity, where we're shifting out into two frequencies. And that, I think, is very obvious to anyone that's looking at this from that perspective.
Do you think all of these beings, and I'm including interdimensional and, the different ones that you were talking about, do you think that all of them are helping the ascension, is what I call it, but the new earth and the new consciousness? Or do you think some of them are pulling us in another direction, without going too negative, but I'm just curious about that?
Well, everything really Amy is saying is what we're seeing on the planet right now. We live in a reality that's a duality. We've got to have the contrast because that allows us to make choices about whether we want to experience something that is loving and heartfelt or not loving, I would use. So you've got what is not loving and what is loving. And we're making these choices, and through it we experience certain things. And that either guides us to the other side of that polarity, or we get involved in that. And each soul, I believe, has a choice to decide what they choose to experience on the planet this time. And that's what she's saying. Ultimately, everyone, every soul ascends to a higher a place of being, higher frequency, higher vibration. I remember a 9-year-old explaining to me how we all came from source. And she said, and the souls go through different levels, different densities. And we're all sort of helping each other through this awakening to get back to source. And she said, there are those that are still in the more negative, less loving frequencies. And we're helping, some of us are helping those. And we've got beings that are intelligence is helping us to get to another level. And so it goes on. We're all helping each other. And I talk about my non-human team, and what I'm really saying is I feel I'm supported on that other level by beings that have the ability to guide and teach and help me grow, just as you and I are doing our bit on the planet to help with what we understand. So we're all in this together in a way, but we're all choosing to be as limited or as expansive that will help our soul's growth. So we may choose not to know this time. We may choose to stay in this density because this time this suits our soul's purpose and growth. Whereas others are saying, no, I've achieved what I hope to achieve in this lifetime. On that, I want to now go to a greater awareness. I'm ready to expand into a greater awareness. So I see it all as a soul choosing that. I believe, like yourself, being aware that you came as a soul onto this planet to do your mission, if you like, or your purpose. There are many that have come in awakened to they've come in with the mission with and I call it two missions. There's one which is the soul having its own personal agenda, and the mission that is for humanity. So there's like the personal growth, but there's also that bigger picture that is part of our service to humanity, if you like. And many are coming in as hybrids, and some are coming in as walk-ins, and that's walk-in souls. And I've met a number of those that identified to being a walk-in soul from, and they've come in as a part of that agenda of helping to awaken humanity. And there's one particular lady I'm thinking of who says that she's come in as a walk-in soul from the 13th dimension. And she said, there we're just energy and light. We don't need to, everything is just in an intelligence. And she said she's come into the physical body because that's the best way to help support and help us connect to that information and that awareness that she embodies. So there's this huge complex program of different levels of programs or agendas to assist with this shift in consciousness on multiple levels. It's not just one level. It seems to be a galactic program, for want of a better word, that is here to help us as a collective humanity to reach this higher understanding, or this greater awareness, or this shift in consciousness. Ascension is the other word for it, to take us to where we are ready to go in terms of the new earth, which, as one 16-year-old told me, is already waiting for us. It's already there. We just now need to move into that awareness.
Wow, that's fantastic. So do you think that there are any of those children who talk about moving from this consciousness? Are any of them mentioning that what we do here affects other dimensions?
Absolutely. And that was why there's been, I believe, an acceleration of more awakened humans coming onto the planet. Because one of the crucial points was when we reached a certain level of technology, particularly when we released nuclear bombs and what have you, these intelligences said, you're not only affecting your planet, but this is impacting on all the dimensions. We can't have that. We can't have that happen. And so there's been, I believe, a deliberate program of acceleration of human consciousness, so that what I liken it to, Melissa, is that you've got a 3-year-old with a loaded gun who doesn't realize that the damage it can do. And they're really trying now to raise our consciousness, our level of maturity, so that we can operate in a completely different way to this aggressive, very barbaric behavior that we have to feel good about ourselves or to achieve anything, we've got to damage everybody else in the process, rather than realizing that we're all one and we're all together in this. And there's no separation to the consciousness of humanity. We're all in this literally together as a consciousness. And so I believe the technology that we have has been part of the instigator of this acceleration of consciousness, and why so many are coming into this planet from all over the cosmos, including other dimensions, with different abilities to help stabilize this planet and to get it on track again. When you have a 10-year-old that's very aware, they've come in to help with the pollution on this planet. I've got information from 8-year-olds that say that they can communicate with the elements, and also children saying they communicate with animals and plants and even crystals. So we've got these wonderful new souls coming in with all these abilities. Now, they haven't come in for a waste of time. They've come in because they know their skills and their awareness is needed on this planet now. And I was talking to a 15-year-old that I wrote about in The New Human from New Zealand, who told me that he was an Arcturian ambassador, and explained that he's here to help us with a new ecology, new habitat that is in harmony with the planet. So this is the awareness of these new generations of human. I think the one thing that I want to say is, and they know when they're being lied to. They know when things don't have integrity, because I remember talking to a 7-year-old who, apart from telling me that he could speak dolphin and gave me a demonstration of it, which was just amazing, he then said, I can tell when someone lies and when they tell the truth. And I said, so how do you feel when, how do you know? And he said, well, when they're lying to me, I go all cold. And when they tell the truth, I feel warm, was how he interpreted that frequency. And this is a 7-year-old, very open to how he understood things. I mean, the children have told me they've been taken. They know what's that the moon is artificial, that there are beings under the moon surface. They talk about a whole heap of things that are being kept from us. And this is what has been fascinating. When I had a 9-year-old explain that he was from Orion, that he was a light physicist, and he worked with time travel technology. And what he does is he goes to various sacred sites where he gets downloads of information at each sacred, like Chichen Itza he's been to, and others, where he says he gets downloads, and explained how the pyramids need pure water to surround them and the right consciousness. And then you can go to other planets, other dimensions through a portal, because they then create a portal. And this is fascinating that these children have this awareness and this understanding. And that is why I have so much hope for the future, because I honestly believe they haven't come for a waste of time. They've come because they know they can make a difference. And the most important thing is that we support them. And what is worrying me is there are those with less loving agendas, shall we say, that want to stop this from happening. And there are various things that are they've used on this planet to shut down consciousness, from polluting our food and our water, chemtrails. There's a whole heap of things that are suppressing our health, but also our awareness. And the more people understand that, the more they can do something about it and start looking at ways to prevent that from happening, such as organic foods, for example, and looking at the purity of the water that we drink, and also understanding that water has an energy and has a frequency that we can raise ourselves and we can energize.
Yeah, everything has consciousness. So, I mean, this is kind of personal, so I'm going to ask you this question. So a lot of the things that you are describing that these children have, I've also experienced. So I know, I can all everything talks to me. The walls sometimes, like in my own home, my home will tell me things. And what I've realized, and I can tell when someone is not in their authentic truth. Because sometimes people believe their lies. That's the way I see it. Like they're not in their own authentic truth, that something doesn't feel right in what they're saying to me. So I do believe, I don't think I came here necessarily with all that open, but I think that there may be even adults that have similar experiences right now. And what do you do when these adults, this happens quickly? So mine has been a gradual thing. In the last maybe 8 years, I've gotten so many downloads. I just don't even know how to function without the downloads. That's the only way I navigate my world, is through the way I consider it, like my higher consciousness of the universe shows me. But what do you suggest to people who are newer at this, but are experiencing some of these things, but they're adults?
Very good question, Melissa. And this is part of what's been going on with more and more individuals, particularly, believe it or not, since 2012, which is interesting. Some of us said that was very crucial, that particular date for many people, as an activation or a catalyst for their awakening. Others have, it might be through a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience or shamanic experience, for example, or even a healing experience or profound grief activates more of their multidimensional awareness. What I ask individuals when they want to understand more about their journey, how they're understanding themselves or whatever, is a process where I can show them how to bring that into 3D. And what I mean by that is bringing it in so that they are fully integrated with a 3D aspect, so that it all works in harmony, as I call it, so that you've got your grounding, really important that you're grounded, but also important that you have access to your multidimensional self as a normal thing, not that you have to always meditate or go into an altered state at all. It should be accessible to you in the same way your left brain thinking is. I say, and what I do is show them the difference between left brain thinking and right brain multidimensional information. So I show them how to cut off the thinking side of themselves to be open to their multidimensional selves. And with that, also bringing into their conscious awareness, not just the fact that they get the downloads, which will come from either their subconscious, superconscious self, but also the team. And I call the team, and many will call it either their spirit guide or life guide or gatekeeper or whatever, but connecting them consciously to that so that they see them clairvoyantly, they hear them clairaudiently, and they can start asking questions. So making it, if you like, bringing it into 3D and making it tangible, making it real. And I do that through a process where I get there and talk to their superconscious through a certain process where I'm saying to the superconscious, now's the time to release all the programs, all the implants, all the agendas that are no longer serving this soul from this lifetime or any other. There's a certain process that I was given by my team to do that. I then take them through certain frequencies to bring them back into alignment. Then I say, right, now we're going to bring them in. Because I said, at the moment, you're talking to your best friend behind a wooden door. Let's open that door and find out who they are. Because, I'll say to many intuitives, well, who is it you're working with? What do you know about them? And they'll say, oh, well, it sounds loving and, it's always helpful. I'm saying, but you still don't know who they are. I said, that's no good, is it? They're your best friend. You should be knowing who they are and why they're with you and how many lifetimes they've been with you and how many's in the team and what the other members of the team are doing. Because then you can have confidence, because you can ask questions and say, well, I don't understand it. Show me another way. Whether they show them clairvoyantly or something, or give them information that helps them understand. So you can question in an equal way rather than just being a conduit for that information. You know where it's coming from. What's their energetic signature? Let's find out. So this is just giving them tools to help them ride the bike so that they know where the lights are and the brakes are and whatever. So in that way, you're bringing it into 3D, you're making it tangible, giving them tools that then they can continue to open that door with. Because many are afraid, or they think, oh, well, I'm not really sure. Well, let's make you sure, make you know and feel and resonate to that information. How do you resonate? Well, there's one way with an energetic signature. There's another way with a frequency that you feel. I said, but you can also say, now validate that. Show me in some other way this has integrity. So you question, so that ultimately you can be confident that whatever you've been given is accurate and it's useful and it's coming from the right place. I said, and the other thing is your intention. What is your intention? Because that starts everything off. If it's an intention from the highest spiritual source, then that's the frequency you're putting out. That's what you're going to draw to you. I said, because that's how it works. It's all about intent. It's all about what you're putting out is what you're going to get back. And I said, and if you're working from fear or ego, well, that's the lower frequencies you're going to get. So it's like your best friends, what friends do you stick with because they're the same frequency as you, and the ones that you realize that you never feel very good after they've left the house, and you think, don't really enjoy that friend very much. It's exactly the same thing. There is no difference. And so to me, my job is normalizing it because it is normal. It's part of our heritage. It's part of what you knew when you came in as a soul. All I'm doing is reminding you of how it works so that you can get back to having that balance and integrity that you had at the beginning, so that you can start working in an integrated, balanced way. So in the end, you don't need to go into trance. You don't need to meditate. You'll just call them in and say, what about this? Oh, thanks very much. And then you can go and do your washing up, or you go and drive the car, or whatever it is. It isn't meant to be separate. It isn't separate. It's part of you. And it's just that people have blocked that off, or they've been told not to trust it because what you're knowing, you're feeling, you're sensing, what's all of that? Well, that's multidimensional information that you're being given. Do you listen or do you not listen?
Most people don't trust that part of themselves because they were taught not to trust themselves. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're just a kid. You don't get it. So they were taught that. And the other part that I loved what you said was how you really need to be grounded. And a long time ago, I was shown how important it is for me to make sure that every download that I receive is completely grounded, because that's the only way you're going to be able to share the knowledge and share the understanding with whomever. And the grounding is very important. And that's the other thing I see a lot, is that people work so much up here and they're not really connected to the earthly being. And because if we're a hybrid, and I think we all are, like you kind of said, I think that we have many different hybrid experiences in our DNA, right? Our junk DNA. And we're here to be human. So bringing in that higher wisdom, we need to ground it in.
Melissa, it's absolutely vital. And what I've found with a lot of star seeds, because they struggle with being in this density and not feeling part of the planet, feeling like they don't want to be here and all the rest of it. And I'm saying, but no, you as a soul came here to be 3D too. And even though it's difficult, it's like I explain, it's a bit like a human boarding school that you don't want to go to because you don't want to go to your boarding school and learn things. And I'm saying, but you've come to the boarding school because you've come here to learn and to grow. And eventually you'll go home again, to your real home or whatever. But in the meantime, even if you don't like boarding school, it's important that you're here because you've got things to do. So this is, you've got, I said, you've still got to realize no matter how connected you are to your multidimensional awareness and how beautiful that is, You've still got to mow the lawn and cook tea for the kids, because that's part of the mandate. And if you don't have that grounding, you can't ever work with any of this. You've come here to help with that transition. And you can't if you're not part of the world. And one of the most important things I think we are to help the children coming in is we're helping them to understand how to be human. Looking after, eating the right food, looking after themselves. It isn't all about their connection to their star family and that other mission. It's also because they're in a 3D reality. They've come here to help change it. And running away from it is not the way it goes. We've got to embrace it and say, right, this is a task, guys. What can I do to help the collective human consciousness and each other? Because that's why the soul came in the first place. Otherwise, you're not following your soul mandate, because that's part of it. So grounding, and this is why when, it's very important to send out all these beautiful frequencies for healing and for love and all the rest of it. But realize too, we've got a very physical chaos going on this planet right now. And we've got a job with that as well, in terms of helping on a very physical, down-to-earth basis, being informed, working with what we have to make a difference, even if it's helping each other to remain positive and loving and caring. That's what we can do. We can make somebody's day by smiling at them. It's about bringing that energy with you on this 3D so that we can start shifting it. And that you're doing with yourself, but be present with it. Know what you're doing.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'm going to switch gears just a hair. I would like to talk to you about experiences that you've helped kids or even adults with around ET abduction. I don't know how else to put it, or contact. Can you tell me a little bit, maybe some stories around that? Because a lot of people see that as a fearful thing, but I don't think it is.
It's a very big and important question, because there are many people, when they first have encounters as a child or whatever, may be absolutely terrified and not understand what's going on, because often they're put in an altered state and taken on the board craft and what have you. Certainly the earlier generations, what I call the older models and what have you, it was very much a fearful thing for many of them to begin with. What happens is, as they become more, have more understanding of what's going on, often that fear goes. So you go from being very fearful to understanding. And it's almost like a shamanic wake-up call, if you like, where the shaman has to transcend their human fears before they can operate multidimensionally. When I've had adults that have had an experience where it's been very scary for them, I will take them into that experience again through hypnosis, for example. And what you can do is, when they're there, allow them to see what actually happened. Because often what we imagine happened or we think has happened isn't necessarily the full story. And it may not even be accurate, because we're coming from fear. So they'll just remember it was fearful. I'll give you an example of that. I was working with a family in England, actually, and there was the whole family, the grandmother, the mother, and the children were taken up on board a craft, and they all wanted to understand what happened. And the grandmother had been in fear virtually all her life, right from a small child. And she was quite scared about having even hypnosis and finding out what happened, because she'd got this huge fear. So I said to her, right, well, I'm going to ask your superconscious to take you to the origin of that fear. And what was fascinating is she went right back to being 2 years old in her cot. And I said, okay, so what's happening? And she said, I'm looking up and I'm seeing 2 mantis beings standing over me, she said, and I'm absolutely terrified. So I said to her, so did they do anything to harm you? Did they hurt you in any way? She said, no. She said, they were just observing me. So I said, they didn't hurt you? No, I just became terrified because I didn't expect to see that and didn't expect to see them. So we cleared that imprint. She came out of it almost dancing in happiness, because what she'd found is the rest of her life, they'd been helping her with teaching her downloads, teaching her what was going on. She said, they've been with me all my life helping me. And she said, I didn't realize that, because she'd kept going back to the fear that was because she'd seen these strange entities in her room when she was a child. And it had all stemmed from that. So sometimes what people believe has happened, or their own fear because they didn't know what was happening, is in fact not the true record of what happened. And when I've taken others on board craft and they've seen themselves on a bed or whatever having a procedure, I've got them to talk to the beings and said, okay, so why have you brought me to the craft? And many of them are having healing procedures. And we found with our research in the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation of the 4,200 individuals, that 50% of those conscious memories of that 4,000, 50% had healing on board craft. So this is not, the public information. It's like we are operating from fear rather than from actual knowing of what's going on. And the more we understand, the more we explore our fear, the more often we find out what we feared wasn't exactly what was going on at all. And this has happened so many times where I've taken people into a space where they've been fearful, and we've found a whole new dialogue once they've been able to look at it without that perception that this is bad for me. And it may have been, I don't know till I take them there. But what I can do is when they're in that space, say, okay, are any of these beings familiar? And usually there's one that's very familiar, which surprises them. And then I'll say, ask that being how many times they picked you up. And they'll go 2, 5, 7, da. Okay, right. So ask why they brought you this time. This is to teach me things. How do you feel about that? Well, that sounds all right. And then I'll say to them, have you on any level consented to this? Any level? And they'll usually say, yes, before I came here. So as a soul. So does that resonate? Does that feel right to you? Yeah, that feels okay. That makes sense to me. So when you can get them into that space to ask the questions with a dialogue with these entities, you can do that as well, because they can do that because everything is now. There's no such thing as time. And that we're working on that multidimensional level where they can then ask all the questions they want in that space and come away and they've got everything they need to know. And that's how you can shift from fear into understanding. The children, many of them now, have no fear at all. They'll go with their special friend on board craft. They're more fearful of humans often than these beings that teach them things on board craft. One young man of 8 said to me that he goes and he's shown how to use his mind with a lot of other children and how to manipulate energy, how to work with telepathy. And he said, I'm taught complex things. So I said to him, when you say complex things, can you tell me? And he says, no, it's too complex for you. So there you go.
That's funny. Now you won't understand. I only understand it. And he probably does. And who knows, he may take that knowledge and bring it years from now and create something or help the planet or whatever the reason is. So just because they're receiving knowledge, and I've noticed that with when I get downloads, sometimes it's a download and I know like a piece, but I don't feel like I've unpacked it completely. We're receiving this information from these beings. Everyone is. And those who are open are embodying it or taking it in. Do you think that we are, through all of this, I know that we're in the process of changing our consciousness, but is there anything else that's happening as well as the shift in consciousness?
I think that we're also developing a new biological system of activating our dormant DNA. And what I say is my feeling around that is a lot of the downloads are complex files that are compressed files of information that we can't yet understand, as you were saying yourself. And the question is, well, so what's the purpose of that if you can't access that information? And I think as our dormant DNA gets activated, it's like it's going to be a new kind of biological computer. We're going to need new software for that computer. So what is the software? The downloads of compressed files of data that will be available to us as we need that, as we slowly find ourselves becoming more of, and a kind of superhuman really, because we will be accessing more of our dormant DNA. And goodness knows what abilities, what awareness and understanding we will have. We are going to need that software to help us navigate this multidimensional activated human. And that's what I believe is how it's going to happen. We will find abilities and awareness on so many other levels that we haven't even begun to understand. So, you know, I often go back to that film Lucy, and for those that have not seen it, it's about a young lady who gets activated through chemicals. She becomes, this leaks into her system and activates her dormant DNA, and she becomes more and more multidimensionally conscious till she almost becomes light. And I think that's a very interesting film because I suspect that that's exactly how it's going to be for us. We will not be as we are now. We will look on ourselves in a completely different way once we have that extra activation, if you like. And something will be the catalyst for that. Whatever that is, I'm not sure. But we're already getting those frequencies, and we're getting those frequencies from the activated children, from those, the sacred sites, the crop circles, the frequencies hitting this planet. Each one of us with our downloads are bringing in that activation in our energy field. As we connect with one another, we are continuing to spread those frequencies out. And this is how it's moving. And it's moving at accelerated rate, I believe. And this is what's so exciting.
It definitely is. I think a lot of us were called here. What do you call the people who've been here for a long time?
We're the bridge builders. We're the ones that have a foot in each camp so that we can help bring the older models over into more of themselves. And we're also there to help the younger generations to understand what it's like to operate in 3D. So, we've come in to do that, to help both sides of that awareness to understand each other, if you like.
Yeah. You called them older models. I thought that was funny. I love that. Yeah, the bridge and also to pave the way. I think that there is a certain place that we needed to be at a certain of our own consciousness to help bring in these children as well. So Mary, I loved this conversation. I think you're wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me. Can you just tell us what your website is in case anybody wants to get hold of you?
Yes, it's acern.com.au. That's acern.com.au or maryrodwell.com.au. I'm also on Facebook, and it's very easy to find me.
Yes, it is. And your description and your bio and all your links will be down in the description area. And thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Melissa Feick, and much love to you all.